Now is the time for change. Doing business in the 21st century is made possible with Ngongi, external and internal audit assurance providers. Log on to ngongi.com to find out more.
Executive remuneration is a hot topic in many countries. The global financial crisis propelled the issue into prominence, and the continuing rise in income inequality isn't helping the emotion around what executives are paid. Our expert guests in the studio are Gerald Seegers, Director of Human Resource Services at PwC, and headhunter Johan Redelinghuys, partner of Heidrick & Struggles. I'm Leigh Roberts, and with me is Mervyn King. Mervyn, what's your view on the global debate around executive remuneration?
Well, I think we've got to look at the context, because the context has changed completely. We were brought up on the basis of value being the present value of future discounted future cash flows. So we looked through a financial lens, and we weren't concerned about how the cash flows were created as long as they were positive going into next year, next fiscal year. But today value is a completely different concept. Companies around the world are looking at the impacts of how the company makes its money on financially, socially and environmentally. So there are three critical aspects, because you could make 100 million rand bottom line, but you could have negative impacts on society and the environment. You're actually destroying value. So the question of the consideration of total value embraces these three concepts today. So remuneration committees around the world are having a rethink. And the rethink is, how do you incentivize management so that management can, the positive impacts, how they can enhance those in the year ahead? The negative impacts, how, Mr. Manager, are you going to ameliorate or eradicate them in the year ahead? And so they measure these things, and of course there's no metric for these, but they will lay out what are the positive impacts you're going to enhance, what are the negative impacts you're going to eradicate, so that they can honestly say in the integrated report, we are increasing the value of the company. So longevity, value creation.
We do need to have a change in mindset, but right now, people are just focusing on the big question, are chief executives paid too much?
Yeah, Leigh, I think we've gone from 2008 to now, which, I mean, if you ever look at it, it's gone from a financial crisis to a period of growth and transformation. But I think as part of that transformation, which I agree with Mervyn, is that coming along with this, things have changed quite dramatically, and the impact on the environmental and social issues have become more to the fore. So, to me, the acid test, I always like to say is that, look, can the CEO look at his lowest paid earner and say, from year on year, my wealth has increased, or my basic live conditions have increased? If not, then there's something wrong with the way we're working.
Yeah. So, Johan, if somebody says to you, are chief executives paid too much? Your answer is?
There's no doubt that in the last couple of years there's a heightened awareness of this issue, and remuneration committees are much more aware of what's going on, and so one can assume that there'd be a greater guardedness with regard to that. I don't think chief executives are paid too much. They have a very high-risk job, and demanding performance from somebody in a short space of time, and where they have to do regular road shows and this kind of thing. I don't think they're paid too much.
But there's so much negative press, especially in the UK and certainly in the mining sector in South Africa, about how much chief executives and executives get paid. Is the underlying issue here is that there's a lack of trust in business today and lack of trust in executives, Mervyn?
Yes, the trust and confidence in business has waned because of certain crises. The GFC, I think, was a catalyst for that. But we have to acknowledge that we live in a flat, borderless electronic world. So that there could be a headhunter who's not Johan. There could be a headhunter in New York who's looking for a particular kind of skill, and he'll find that a chief executive sitting here with a listed company on the JSE, and he will approach that person and offer him remuneration in US dollars. And that's 10 to 1 already. So it's not an easy question, and that's why remuneration committees more and more have to look at the impact of those three aspects I spoke about earlier. And it's very interesting to me in a lot of integrated reports, and we were at the awards evening for the best integrated report the other evening, and it's fascinating that a lot of integrated reports extract the material issues and explain it in clear, concise and understandable language in terms of the framework, but a lot of them have some detail on remuneration for the very reason that the reader, the user, is looking for how are the executives being remunerated and what's the policy and is it fair? And don't forget that the question of remuneration now goes to an AGM of shareholders and they give a provisional yes or no approval.
We're going to get into the role of the shareholder, but I want to ask Gerald about the pay gap. In South Africa, chief executive total pay to entry-level worker is 150 for JSE companies, 300 in some larger listed companies on the JSE. How fair is that?
It's a good question, but I think it's not the issue. And I think measuring the, people ask, why do we want to measure the pay gap? To me, it's an internal equity issue, and that's only. It's not an external issue, because you can find very successful companies in the US, for example, where the pay gap is 1,500 times. You know, a good CEO of a financial service company, a good CEO of a mining company, the one's more successful than the other one, but the pay gaps may be very different. So I think it's an important internally where the board should be understanding, making sure year on year the pay gap is not worsening or widening, but it is an internal issue. The moment we make it external, I think benchmarking is dangerous and it becomes politicized. And that's the danger we have around that.
But it happens. Johan, so is it really unfair to look at?
You know, in Switzerland, they have strongly recommended that the differential between the highest and the lowest paid should not be more than 12. So the chief executive should not earn more than 12 times what his lowest paid workers work. So the question is, can this kind of legislation work? Can it work? My feeling is it can't, and I wouldn't recommend it. So people are trying every mechanism possible to try and even things out. But inequality is around us in every way. We're unequal in intellect and unequal in talent and unequal in to try and get to a level of equality is such a...
Yeah, and I suppose, Mervyn, I mean, 12 is a bit low, and I think most people would agree with that, because there's quite a lot of personal risk in being a chief executive, and also, if you don't perform, you get kicked out.
Well, yes, but not only that, see, this is one of those issues that it's so critical to have that ongoing strategic communication with your key stakeholders to build up trust and confidence. So I'm with Gerald here that it's an eternal issue, but it's a question of how you manage it. And if you have that ongoing communication with your workers and start talking to them, why does the boss get paid and why you get paid? And yes, I understand your working conditions and everything. So the corporate stakeholder relationship officer becomes absolutely critical in these issues. And I've often posed the question, if Lonman had had a corporate stakeholder relationship officer and had this ongoing discussion, you know, with the workers and their working conditions, well, we don't know what the outcome would have been. But there may not have been a Marikana.
If I may, I mean, I think we've got to look at what the issue is. I think the one issue which I agree with Mervyn is, first of all, around the world there's been increase for regulation. To me, any form of regulation or quota is bad news. I think in South Africa we've learned through the master, here on my left, self-regulation is a far better way of going through, and I think that's the step we should continue with. Managing in what good corporate governance is, and you mentioned a lot of issues around, for example, the link between the REM committee and the sustainability committee, for example. So level of pay is one thing. Has the level of pay created an income inequality? The answer is generally not really. You've got to look at what are the other reasons, and these may be external to the company. These may be poor service delivery.
They may well be, but isn't this a societal issue that we are dealing with the income inequality, rising income inequality around the world? So against that backdrop, and people see chief executives paid 45 million a year, it's gross.
Well, and I think, but this, I think, is where the question now comes into where the social and the environmental issues becoming more and more to the fore. And I think this is where it just hasn't happened at a rapid enough pace. Where, as I said, what is that corporate doing for its immediate community, its employees and the greater community. And that's what we need to start measuring in terms of the incentives.
Johan.
Mervyn says we're living in a flat world. We're also living in a world where information flows dramatically very, very quickly. It's very unfortunate that the 21 million handout to the chief executive of Anglo Platinum happened at a time while the platinum strike was on, and suddenly the people working there see what this is all about. There's some dramatic examples of this. I don't know if you saw in the Sunday Times this last weekend, Niall Carroll, the departing chief executive of the Royal Bafokeng, is being handed 1.5 billion rand by the Royal Bafokeng, but he has created 39 billion rands worth of value. So was it a good deal?
So this brings us back to your point that it actually has to be context. How much value is created, not only by that person, but the organization. But just going back to regulation, you said that you don't want regulation, it should be self-regulated. But around the world, we are seeing increased regulation. In the UK, that remuneration committee of a company has to now consider fairness between executives and the wider workforce.
To me, it's always been there, and again, a good board would be able to demonstrate that. And I think there's a good correlation between the quality board and the community in which the company operates, and the CEO or the exec pay. I think there's a direct correlation between all three of those.
Are we ever going to get away to see less regulation, or surely it's going to just be a spiral towards more?
I think you might not see a lot of regulation, but you'll see a heightened awareness. But remember that chief executives are a resourceful lot, and if you do try and impose some kind of a standard, they'll find a way around it.
A resourceful lot. On that note, we're going to break now, but do stay with us as there's more on the hot topic of executive remuneration when we come back.
Ngonki has the professional capacity to deliver on your external and internal audit assurance requirements. Visit ngonki.com.